Good afternoon, everyone. I hope we still awake after lunch break. Okay, this is the first, panel discussion. First of all, welcome to the panel discussion on IFRS Accounting Standard Implementation Challenge by ASEAN Public Interest Entity or PIE. So under the term of latest development in financial reporting, CLMV perspective, the panel will be look into the key IFRS accounting standard implementation challenge with emphasis of ASEAN PIEs. So in this section, originally we have about 90 minutes to cover, but I think we be a little bit behind the schedule. We do our best. We probably not cover every question that we have, but we pick up, prioritize the things. Yeah. But before we start, I just would like, to give you a little bit background for Laos. For the IFRS implementation in Laos for briefly. So in Lao PDR, the standard setter is Accounting Regulatory Department. That's the standard setter under Ministry of Finance. So they're setting the standard for public sector, for IFRS, for PIE, and also Lao Financial Reporting Standard for non-PIE as well. So under Ministry of Finance, they also oversight the financial reporting standard for insurance company and also non-PIE. For the Bank of Lao PDR, they oversight the financial reporting standard for the bank and financial institution and also the security company. For the Lao Security Exchange Commission, they oversight the financial reporting standard for listed company. In Lao, back to 2017, we adopt, based on the law, we need to adopt IFRS on and after for the period 2017 onward. So for the company who not ready to adopt, and then they need to prepare themselves with the roadmap by 2021, they need to fully comply. But however, it's very challenging for us. So therefore, in 2020, Ministry of Finance has been issued the other notification to extend the implementation of IFRS from 2021 to 2025. So we have now 2023, we still have need to 2-3 years more, to prepare ourselves to fully adopt for PIE. That's something very challenging for us. This is for the Lao PDR. Therefore, today we have our 8 speakers to representing CLMV and also the speaker from regional to share with us their experience on the IFRS implementation. So first of all, I would like to warmly welcome our speaker, Mr. Piyut Charges, Council Member, Institute of Chartered Accountants of India. Welcome to the panel. And the second person I would like to introduce is Mr. Leung Thi and Yut Tuyis, SRN Deputy General Director, PwC, and also Mr. Nissen Ferrando. So he could not in person join the panel discussion today, but he will attend online. Good afternoon. And also we have Professor Siddhartha Uttama, board member of IFAC and also AFA Council member. And we have Ms. Nakonsi Manotam, Director General, Accounting and Finance Department, Bank of the Lao PDR. And we have Mr. C. Savat Duong Savat, Deputy Chief of Accounting Division, BCEL. And also Mr. Van Le, Audit Director of EY Lao. And last but not least, Mr. Chen Pet, Deputy Director General, Accounting and Auditing Regulator from Cambodia. So please join me to warmly welcome all the participants to the floor. Thank you so much for your time for participating in the discussion on the panel. I think we starting with our opening remarks for each panel, and beginning with briefly about your experience in IFRS adoption and implementation. What has been your observation so far on the adoption of IFRS accounting standard as a globalized accepted framework for financial reporting? So this is, you have 2 minutes for each person to share your experience. Can we start with who would like to, Professor Siddhartha first, or?
Okay, thank you. 2 minutes. All right. So first, I think we know that adopting or converging your accounting standards to IFRS will provide benefits. Okay, will increase the quality of financial statements, and hopefully by having a high quality financial statements, it will attract investments, stimulate economic growth, and so on. But at the same time, I think we also need to realize there are also some risks in implementing IFRS. We saw earlier presentations regarding standards in IFRS, because IFRS standards use the principle-based approach. So it's not detailed, okay, require a lot of professional judgment. And in some standards, like the ones that we have earlier, about expected credit loss, and also the insurance, and also the fair value, goodwill impairment, and so on, require a lot of professional judgment. And this can also be used instead of improving the quality of financial statements, but also to manage earnings, okay, to window dress financial statements. And because the standards are principle-based, so it's not really easy, to detect of this behavior. So in this case, then I think we need to make sure, if one country wants to implement IFRS, we need to also make sure that it's not only adopting or converging IFRS. We also need to make sure that the accounting profession is ready, okay, is ready to use the IFRS to prepare financial statement based on IFRS. And to do that, you need a competency, okay, a competency of our profession, professional accountants, not only in terms of the technical competencies, but also in terms of professional skills, and also very important in terms of their ethical values and attitudes. So I think this has to be done, this process of converging or adopting IFRS, this has to be done simultaneously with also improving the competency of our accounting professions. So I think that's what I want to highlight with regard to this. Thank you.
So and then we move on to PU. Can you sharing your perspective on this?
Thank you very much. Coming? Yeah, thank you very much. Of course, I endorse the views of Siddhartha very well. IFRS convergence or adoption. Of course, if I go back to India, we have gone into convergence because to meet our regulatory requirements, economic environments. So every country may have a different regulatory requirements, economic environment, current accounting practices. All these three are most important things before we actually implement or we actually update, whether we adopt or we converge. So all the accounting bodies actually have to dealt with these three important areas according to me. And one of the biggest challenge always has been the regulatory environment which is currently there. What are the laws in there? What amendments needs to be made in the law? So let's take an example. There are laws which are the exchange boards where all these public interest entities are listed. So how far they are supporting the implementation of IFRS, that has been the different issue. Whether they are accepting this fair value measurement actually, which is one of the major issue of fair value measurement when it comes to adoption of or convergence of IFRS. So how far this exchange boards are really ready to accept that. So we need to be in a continuous dialogue with these people. That's the most important thing which I believe. The second, which I feel, because last 5 years, 6 years already, convergence has started taking place. It's almost 8 years at some places, some countries, is the educational programs. Like what we have done is to educate our members as well as the stakeholders, more importantly. Of course, members will anyways pick up with that, but what's very important for the stakeholders, what we did is we came out with a course on IFRS itself, which is called a certification course. A lot of our professional accountants are also employed with the stakeholders, the companies, with the government bodies. And if they are pursuing this IFRS course, obviously they realize the importance, as is mentioned by the Siddhartha, also the value of the financial statement changes. It increases the investor confidence. But unless and until they actually understand what is going to be achieved by this FIRS, it's not going to happen. And it's not going to be an easy roadmap, according to me. And therefore, we need to have some sort of certification courses on a regularly basis. I do see a lot of courses happening, but it's not such a deep dive. It's only but it needs to have a deep dive because there are a lot of issues. More importantly, considering it being a principle based and not rule based. So it has to be a deep dive. We need to keep this thing into important. IFRS relies a lot upon the judgment. Again, as mentioned, professional skepticism is very important. And therefore, the courses are also equally important. And updation, regular updations, what we call CPE programs in our continuing professional education program. So members are required to continually professionally engage, keep doing it, and keep developing, attending such conferences. I'm sure this will also help. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you, Piyut. That's very good. Sharing for those. This morning you have been share a lot of things. Yeah. Okay, and then next person, I would like to move on to Mr. Nissan Ferdinand. Can you share your experience on IFRS implementation observation?
Thank you. I think I have already shared our experience in my presentation. So therefore, I would not take the 2 minutes, but I would like to re-emphasize based on what was mentioned by the first 2 panel members, a critical factor in IFRS implementation is once again this enforcement, monitoring, and oversight. Because IFRS adoption, passing a legislation saying that we would adopt IFRS from such and such a date is very easy. But then these judgmental aspects, exercising judgments and ethical attitudes, fair value measurements, and all that needs reliability. So that can be fulfilled only when your oversight function is strong. So the IFRS implementation cannot be achieved on its own alone, but you need to have a parallel and effective oversight mechanism also. Thank you.
Thank you. And then we move on to Ms. Tu Yen.
Okay, so hi everyone. So based on my observation, in order for the successful implementation of IFRS, I think that first of all, the companies would have like a proper strategy for the implementation. The strategy should be come from the leadership on the top, and then will like implementation to the whole company. Without the agreement and approval and support for the leadership, the company will lack up the resources and the budget for the implementation. And also when there is the strategy, the proper strategy, the company can like build up a suitable roadmap for the adoption. Because without the roadmap, the company can like have a lot of like activities, maybe over activities, or maybe less the activity for the implementation, which is like not effective and not efficient. Secondly, for the IFRS adoption, people is very important. People, we need to develop and training the people, and the training is not only for the accounting department, but also for the leadership level, because some of the accounting policy, which is very principle based, we need the approval and the level of leadership to make the decision. So the trainings should be for the other department, for example, like sales, marketing, and investment department as well. That's for the company. They need to develop and update the accounting policy and procedure for the collaboration among the departments within the company. One more thing is about the technology, which is very important. If we do the manual conversion, it's just for short term, but for the long term, we need to embed and to implement IFRS into the system. Some of the company, when they implement the ERP system, they forget to embed the IFRS into the system. They just install for the local GAAP. And a few years later, when they transfer into the IFRS and they say that, oh, they forget to install and implement IFRS into the system. At that time, they need to do again from the start, from the beginning. Finally, the company, they need to build up the supervision procedure. Previously, for example, the board of supervision, they just look at and review for the local GAAP. Now they need to enhance and update as well. And they need also have a good collaboration with the regulators and professional association to keep updated with the IFRS knowledge.
Thank you, Ms. Nguyen, for good sharing. So the next person I would like to hearing regulator from Cambodia, Mr. Jen Pat.
Yes.
And then we move on to lead regulator from Laos. After
Yep,
you.
Good afternoon. Thank you. I can start from financial reporting is the trust of the language that we use to communicate the financial statement, the financial information with the investor. So when we consider to adopt the IFRS in our country, we consider for us, when we start our accounting profession in Cambodia in 2002, we choose to adopt. It means that we start to pick up the international accounting standard to implement in Cambodia. And 5 years later, we found that to build more trust on financial reporting, we changed our strategy from adapt to adopt in 2009. And in adopting the standard for CIFRS SME, will be effective in 2010, and for full IFRS to be effective in 2012. And when we start, when the full IFRS become effective, there are some challenges. For the listed company, it's fine because they have enough resource to implement it, but there are some challenges with the bank. Because when we move to the IFRS 9, there are a lot of information need to be support in preparation their financial statement. And when we look back to their system, we cannot capture all the information. That's why we postpone the implementation for the full IFRS for bank. First, we postponed by 2016, but when 2016 comes, they still unable to implement it. And we decide to postpone second time until 2018. And from 2019, all the bank and the insurance companies start to fully adopt the IFRS.
From 2019.
Yeah, from 2019. And when we consider to adopt, we consider two principles. We consider about the relevant and faithfully representation. When we try to present faithfully representation, it becomes less relevant. When we try to be more relevant, and it becomes less faithfully representation. That we need to challenge between both principles to prepare and adopting the financial statement in Cambodia. Thank you.
Thank you. That's very good sharing. I mean, That's you take about a few years to fully comply. That's very good roadmap. So we're hearing from Cambodia. Move on to hearing from the regulator from Lao PDR.
Thank you. Good afternoon. On distinguished guests, it's my pleasure to be a panelist today, and would like to thank the AFS and LCPAA for inviting me to participate in the meaningful conference today. As the regulator perspective, under the circumstance of the globalizations and the banking and financial integration and the need for the foreign investment promotion, the IFRS adoption became an essential action for the public interest enterprise, and as well as for banking sector is the commercial bank and non-bank financial institutions. So the adoption will improve the faithful represent and verifiability, timeliness, and understandability and comparability of their financial report. And by joining this concern, the Bank of Lao PDR has put the plan of the adoption and implementation of the IFRS of the commercial bank in the our strategy financial sector plan, and by the strategy plan is setting from 2021 to 2030. And currently we are in the state of preparing the and implementing the transitional plan for adoption the IFRS. And I enjoy the same comments that as Lao PDR have faced some challenge, mainly on the capacity building of the preparer or the commercial banks, and also the inconsistency of the regulations with the IFRS requirements. That is that we have to work more on to overcome this challenge. That's what I would like to briefly introduce first. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing on the plan for the regulator. Okay, and then we move on to Mr. Vanley first. Vanley.
Yes, thank you. And from our observation in the market, in the Lao PDR market, as sharing from everyone here, that is really a big gap when we change from a rule-based framework, the framework we have now, to a principle framework. I think that is very big gap and very big change for the entities and also for the regulators when we change from local framework to the IFRS. So that's why it requires a lot of efforts from entities and also from regulator to build a suitable journey and suitable roadmap to have the entities to have the fully adoption of the of IFRS. And when we talk about the gap here, so from our observation, the gap including capacity of pupil. First thing, you know that because IFRS is based on the principle basic, so that's why to apply it's very different from entity to other entities. So that's why the requirement that the employee of each company need to have the fully understanding of the requirement of IFRS and then applying in the entity, because they have the different system, have different product, and how to apply it is very important. And when the entity, everyone have the full capacity to understanding the requirement of the IFRS standard, then they just can define the plan to apply, because you know there are a lot of requirements for the data, for the system, for the information. If you need to apply IFRS, especially some new IFRS like IFRS 9, when you build a model for the ECL, you also need to have the historical data. You need to have the economic information, and then you just build the model for the ECL. So that's why from our observation now, the more challenge of the entities besides to the capacity is also the data. And now it's really the suitable time for every entity to start for preparing the data, because you know that now from now to 2026, just only 3 years ahead for the entities to prepare for the IFRS. If they haven't got any data, historical data, they haven't got any model to apply for IFRS 9, right? They cannot apply fair value, right? So that's why it's very important now and very challenge for the entity to prepare for the data. And another challenge is also the process, because you know many entities allow just convert, some of them just convert from family group, family company to the public interest entities. So that's why they also need to have the time to review on the structure, to review on the process, and from that to make it that suitable with the requirement of IFRS. So that's some my observation in the market for the challenge of the entities and also the regulator for the IFRS full implementation. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Vanley, for sharing from perspective of service provider. So one thing is very important to hearing the observation from preparer, and then we move to Mr. C. Savat from BCL.
Thank you, Mr. Sonsai. Good afternoon, everyone. As a PIE entity that we implemented IFRS so far, actually BCL started using IFRS since 2014 as part of a listed company in presenting financial information with a high quality and reliable financial information to our stakeholders. To do so, we have been working closely with our regulator in Laos, like the Bank of the Lao PDR and the Ministry of Finance, vendor, as well as like consulting firms to get the job done. In terms of accounting standard adoption and implementation as a globally accepted framework, I think that this framework bring about the integrity and consistency for accounting standards and practice, regardless of the company or the country. This create a common accounting language that can be understood globally for all related parties, includes like investors, auditors, government regulators, and other interested parties. That's in terms of entity that implementing the IFRS. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sisvas. So we're hearing a lot of experience, comment from different perspective, from regional to CLMV. So I think one thing that we can hearing, in terms of adoption IFRS, so roadmaps is also very important, but the more important is tone from the top management, right? Also very important that make sure that people from the top understand, make budget available, and also provide people to fully dedicate, on this project and so on. Some of historical data is also very important as well. And the standard is very good, but it's very challenging to fully adopt. That this morning we hear a lot of, the presentation, or especially on IFRS number 9, expected credit loss model, I think most of the bank, even here in Lao PDR, we still cannot adopt those. Yeah, and also IFRS number 13. I mean, fair value measurement as well, and also IFRS number 7 on the financial instrument on disclosure. I think that those things is very challenging. I mean, for us in Lao PDR to adopt as well. That's very good sharing. Okay, and then we move on to the next question relating to the adoption and implementation IFRS in Lao PDR and also in CLMV jurisdiction on for this. I would like to start with Mr. Van Ley. I mean, as you are a service provider and has a lot of experience provide a service in Lao PDR, as well as you got a very good, I mean, project from World Bank support on the capacity building for regulator, for preparer, and and so on. So I would like to hearing from you is what is the latest update, and also what is the plan ahead, and what are the key challenging to implement this project in Laos.
Yeah, thank you. So now you know that as said by Mr. Sonsai that in Laos the regulator already built the roadmap for IFRS implementation from 2021 to 2025, in which especially commercial bank, I would like to say that the Bank of the Laos already have a clear plan for commercial bank, in which 2021 they have to complete for the gap analysis and also the detailed implementation plan. And then from 2022 to 2025, commercial banks will need to complete for the implementation and then fully adopt from 1st January 2026. So just an overall roadmap from regulators. And from our observation in the market, I would like to say that now commercial bank is the most active participants in this implementation roadmap. So now almost commercial bank in Laos, more than 40 commercial banks already have the gap analysis and detailed implementation plan, and half of them already start for the project to do the detailed implementation, and plan of them, some of them have planned when have early adoption in 2023, 2024. Yeah, but up to now, I would like to say that just around 15% of commercial bank just really implement for the IFRS, and most of them are foreign branches with a lot of help from parent banks overseas for the implementation. So just the things so far now, and as we discussed that the most challenge is the capacity building. So it is a good news that we have a project sponsored by World Bank to build the capacity for the regulators and also for the public interest entities. And the projects are doing now with the expectation that can build the capacity for the market. And in the program, there are 5 costs of training providing to the regulators, to the key stakeholder, including the public interest entities, for deep understanding on the requirement of IFRS. Besides that, the project also support for regulator to build and to establish the guidance for public interest entities, how to implement, what are the requirements from regulators for the implementation. And I see that it will have the expectation that a lot of change from the project, because at first the program, at first the plan of the regulators, maybe they have planned to issue the regulation during the period from 2022 to 2025. But from the project, we expect that the regulator maybe have early issue of the regulation, and from that the public interest entity can base on that to know the requirement of regulator and prepare for the implementation. So that's the state of the market so far. And talk about the plan. So as our discussion with the regulator and also the public interest entities, they are now really rushed for the implementation because they know about the requirement of first-time adoption. You will see that now most of them apply the local framework, and if they would like to have the first financial statement in 2026, so we need to have at least 3 years, right? Amount of the of the IFRS. So just why now they understand the requirement and now really rush to prepare for the implementation in 2023 and 2024. Yeah, so just they plan for adopt for financial statement and talk about the key challenge. We discussed a lot about the key challenge, capacity, data, process, and talk about the expectation from public interest entity to the regulators. I see that they also expect a lot from guidance from regulator, because when they have the clear guidance, especially for this country, when we move from rule-based to principal pay, they at least they need to have some guidance from regulators, and based on that they have the orientation to build a suitable plan for IFRS implementation. Yeah, so just my sharing based on observation of the market.
Okay, thank you, Wale, for sharing from perspective of service provider in Lao PDR on the latest development. So that's very interesting to know. And then the next person, we will move on to Mr. Sisawat. Could you please share with us your for BCL on your journey to adopt IFRS? What is your key action, has been done and so on? What is the next step need to do to fully comply with IFRS?
Thank you. Like what I stated in the beginning, like BCL started using IFRS since 2014. And we are the first listed company that implemented IFRS in Laos. Take IFRS implementation and adoption into account, our management team had made a great decision to shift from Lao Accounting Standard or LAS to IFRS. And to do so, we allocated an accountable human resource and fund for the project, including gap analysis study, trainings, as well as hiring consulting firm and expert to get on the requirements done. Up till now, although we still not yet fully adopt all standards, but we have a clear and detailed roadmap that we hope that we will adopt full version of IFRS by the end of 2025 and maybe a little bit earlier. Thank you.
Okay, that's good news to be fully comply with. Based on the roadmap. Okay, that's good. Okay. And so we're hearing from preparer, and then we move on to regulator, Ms. Nakonsi. Could you please share with us, your plan on the adoption and implementation of IFRS? Yeah.
Thank you. By following the notification of the Ministry of Finance on the adoption of the IFRS for the PIEs, Bank of Lao PDR, we have the issue the notification to the commercial bank to be prepared for the adoption of the IFRS by in 2026. And based on that, during the transitional period, we have request the commercial bank to submit the gap analysis and transitional plan to the central bank of the Bank of Lao PDR, and have to report the progress of the implementing the transitional plan and the difficulty that they have faced to central bank, my department, accounting and financial department every quarter. And based on this report and monitoring by the central bank, we have observed that more than 99% of all commercial banks have submitted the gap analysis and the transitional plan to the central bank. And the based on the quarterly report to the central bank, more than 89% of the total commercial bank of Laos have implement more than 5 standards, and 8% of the commercial bank then have implement more than 15 standards out of relating 29 standards. For the challenge that we have observed, is the same as Mr. Van Lê mentioned, that is consists about the capacity building, and also the difficulty in apply the IFRS, that the inconsistency of the regulation by the central bank with the IFRS requirement that we have faced, and also some regulation relating to tax that has to be acknowledged, the some expense and under the requirement of the IFRS, and also the preparing the report, financial report that under the regulation of central bank and the requirement by the IFRS, there is the gap that have not both report that is not the same in practice, and the commercial bank have to submit both report to the central bank, and they have to implement the two financial report at this moment. And the and another challenge is the standard is available in English, but not the Lao version interpret officially at this moment. As the regulator, central bank, we have issued some guidance relating to IFRS standard to the bank to implement, but still we have only issued some standard, some guidance to of the standard, but not all. And we are in the progress of the issue more guidance. That is the challenge that we have faced by the regulator perspective that I would like to share. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Nakonsi. I think it's good to hearing that some of the regulation need to be revised, right, to be in line with IFRS requirement, because those regulations still set since the rule based on the Lao accounting system before. So okay, we move from the Lao perspective now to Vietnam. So we understand to Ms. Tuyet, we understand that Vietnam also have a roadmap to adopt IFRS by 2025, right? And if you could, share with us what is your action plan, in order to fully comply in terms of adoption and implementation of IFRS in Vietnam. Yeah.
Okay, so thank you for your question. So similar to Laos, Vietnam has not fully adopt IFRS. So the Ministry of Finance just issued a roadmap for the IFRS adoption in Vietnam, as you mentioned. So after 2025, it is planned that the listed and state-owned company are compulsory to apply the IFRS, but just for the consolidated financial statement, not yet have a guidance for the separate financial statement yet, because as you know that for the consolidated financial statement, it will not impact to the tax matters. So in order to prepare for the roadmap IFRS adoption in Vietnam, based on my observation, there are a couple of like actions by the government and by the Ministry of Finance. Firstly, the Ministry of Finance issued the adoption roadmap, and after that, they organized a couple of like workshops to raise the awareness about the IFRS adoption roadmap, and as well as for the training. The Ministry of Finance collaboration with some of like the association to do the training for like the lecturer in the universities, some of the members in the like government, and for some of the big companies. Also, the Ministry of Finance also have a project to translate from the English to the Vietnamese with the support from the Big Four, including of like PwC. And we also have some like other activities, for example, like the Ministry of Finance, they select a pilot company for like to do the gap assessment and to do the IFRS readiness assessment to see what is the current and the expected stage for the IFRS adoption, to see what is the gap and what are the challenges when a company they adopt for the IFRS. The Ministry of Finance also gather the comments and the surveys from the big corporation on their like difficulty and their challenges when they apply for the IFRS. So so far there are quite a number of like activities to prepare for that IFRS adoption. However, we also see quite a lot of like challenges ahead. For example, like recently, the Ministry of Finance is now that because of they need to get a more assessment to the impact to the industry and to the especially for the state-owned company when they apply the IFRS. Why there's a delay in terms of the IFRS adoption roadmap. So it could be delayed after like 2025. It could be around like 2030. We don't know. So need more time. So those are some action from the Ministry of Finance of Vietnam.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for sharing. I mean, the action plan from Vietnam perspective. Okay, and then we move on to from the perspective of IFAC. I mean, Professor Siddhartha Uttama. So, as the global body for accountant profession, right? And what do you think that IFAC best role in terms of supporting adoption and implementation of IFRS standard? Especially for CLMV countries from IFAC perspective.
Okay, thank you. So we know that IFAC is like an umbrella organization for almost all professional accounting organizations all over the world. We have about, I think, 180 PAO as members of IFAC, and also coming from more than 130 jurisdictions. So in this matter, then IFAC would like to facilitate and encourage collaboration among these members of IFAC, among the PAOs, and sharing experience and also sharing resources. And actually, you can also look at the website of IFAC where we have all these resources and also strategies about how to implement IFRS. Okay, and then the next one is also IFAC plays also a role to voice concern. For example, if there are some issues with regard to the implementation of IFRS, or if there is a plan to revise or develop new standards, and there are some concerns that are common across PAOs, then IFAC will also voice this concern to the relevant standard bodies, for example, like IASB. The next one is that IFAC also has a proactive role, in encouraging the development of the capacity of the PAOs. We have PAO-DAG, Professional Accounting Organization Development Advisory Group. And you can actually, each PAO can directly contact this group and also share, some concerns, and they may also provide some support, like, for example, currently we are in the process of, because, AFA has one program of AFA this year is to have a mentorship program. And we have been talking with from Lao, and also we try to find also the mentee, and hopefully soon we can realize this mentoring program. We also have been communicating with PAO-DAG, and they fully support this, and they're willing to be involved, with this mentoring program. So hopefully this year we can start, about this mentoring program, and also PAO-DAG will be also involved with this. And also, as you can see in this morning, we have Tanya, she's in charge for, from IFAC, in charge for this region. So we can also directly contact her with regard to, not only IFRS, but also other, for example, other SMOs with regard to the implementation of IFSA, internal standards of auditing, quality assurance, and so on. So basically, that's it's the duty, of IFAC, to facilitate their members to be able to implement IFRS. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for sharing on the supporting program from IFAC as umbrella organization to support the member bodies. Okay, that's good. And then we move on with, to PAUs based on your presentation this morning. That's good. We know that India have a lot of experience on adoption and implementation IFRS in your country. So I have some question to ask you about this. The first question is, what is the current status of adoption IFRS standard in your country?
Thank you very much. Briefly, as I mentioned, IFRS was implemented in our country since 2016 onwards. And when I say implementation of IFRS, we didn't adopted it. We converged and we prepared our Ind AS. So there were little departure from the IFRS, which were necessary from a regulatory point of view. Again, an economic environment been quite different when compared to other countries. And also the availability of data at that moment of time was an important consideration, wherein we developed Ind AS. And we implemented Ind AS across the board for all public interest entities. Even, in fact, for the large entities which are not public interest entities, but if they were having a good top line of net worth, having more than 500 crores, and though there are no bank borrowings, there are no public capital, still the implementation was done. So there is another set which is going on along with IFRS converged Ind AS. There is also an accounting standards issued by Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, to whom IFRS does not apply. They have to apply accounting standards basically. So now we have developed a roadmap, and that is basically with the Institute of Chartered Accountants only, because we are also a regulator with the authority given by the Parliament of our India, wherein we can ourselves to all those entities also we can actually regulate and state that IFRS Ind AS has to be implemented. So that is, we have made a roadmap at the ICI that in next 3 to 4 years will converge all the entities, will not restrict it to public interest entities. The main reason being is it is development of capacity building of the professional accountants. There cannot be a distinguishing feature, we feel, between a professional accountant. So there would be a certain class of professional accountants who have clients who are, that is public interest entities, who are implementing IFRS. who are actually presenting their financial statements on IFRS, whereas others are not doing it. So we thought that it's not right to distinguish it. It should be applied across the board. So within 3 years convergence time, I think so it will be implemented across the board, irrespective of the size or whether it's a public interest or no public interest entities. Coming to the second issue, the most important, coming to banks and financial institutions. Financial institutions I've already covered. It's completely implemented, whatever challenges we have faced. Coming to a bank, the biggest roadblock was the expected credit loss only. The biggest ECL was the biggest roadblock, and that's why the central bank is not moving ahead with it. Though the central bank is, as I stated earlier also, central bank is also seeking an statements already, though they are not presented publicly, but they are in-house, they are calling for these statements, which are based after making an expected credit loss provisions. So they are actually examining that, and they have already come with a framework also. So there is already a framework developed by central bank stating that this would be the roadmap for implementation of ECL by the banks. There is one question available to my central bank is that there is already today also in India, we have IRAC norms, which are called income recognition asset classification norms, which are issued by the central bank. And that actually recognizes an expected credit loss by way of making a standard rule-based provision on all the investment grade assets also. So all the FAs, which are with its very low credit risk also requires certain expected credit loss provision, by way of which we call more popularly a standard asset provision. So a financial asset is a standard, a high investment grade, a low credit risk, still certain loss provision is already made. So that's a comfort level available to the banks. And that is the reason the banks in India also survived a lot of recession cycles of 2007, 2008, which did not really fortunately impact India because of this already a provision been there, which was a future looking. So the banks are going slow on that. Central bank is going slow for implementing into the banks, but it will be implemented in the due course, I'm sure, within 2 years period. The last which will be left would be insurance companies. We have a separate regulator for insurance, which is Insurance Regulatory Development Authority. And there is little reluctance from the insurance entities per se for issuing it. It's not really regulator. And the regulator is, along with the Institute of Chartered Accountants, we are continuously in talk with the insurance companies per se, that whether why you should not, and if to the extent how much IFRS disclosure, there should be a departure. We could make a departure also to certain extent for the insurance company per se from, we already have an Ind AS 117, which is equivalent to IFRS. And we can also make certain departures to certain extent. We have already in discussion with the regulator of it. And I believe that will also go through in another 2 to 3 years. So that's what it is. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So basically, another 2 years, I mean, the bank will fully adopt ACL, right? Oh, okay, that's
yes, definitely.
okay. Thank you for sharing. That's very good experience. And then we move on to Mr. Janpat, right? From Cambodia. We know that Cambodia, I mean, within CLMV, Cambodia has the most experience and advanced in terms of adopting IFRS. And could you please share with us, I mean, your journey experience, adopting IFRS?
Yes, thank you. I can start by learning by doing.
Yeah.
Learning by doing.
Learning by doing.
Yeah. We start to issue the regulation to adopt the IFRS in 2009, and it became effective in 2012.
Okay.
And when the 2012 come, the bank come to us.
Okay.
Because in Cambodia, we have bank association and we have the microfinance association come to us.
Yeah.
We cannot adopt it. But we accept their proposal to postpone for sector bank and microfinance only. But in 2012 is the year that Cambodia have the first listed company. We adopt it because we want to start our listed company in Cambodia. That's why we set the date 2012 is the first time of implement the IFRS. So the listed company without delay, all the listed company goes through the IFRS. But for the bank, microfinance, and MFI, we call them to discuss what happened with them, why you want to delay. And we discuss some roadmap together, and they come up with the final proposal for us. They propose to delay until 2016 with the bank, microfinance, and insurance company. But when the 2016 come, but before 2016, 2014, because of the IFRS 9 issue. When the IFRS 9 issue and it became effective in the 1st January 2019. So when they had come back again, they when the IFRS 9 come, they come to us again. Whether we adopt the IAS 39 or we adopt IFRS 9. If we adopt IFRS 9, IAS 9, it's just 2 years and change. So the bank maybe incurred a loss of cost.
Yeah.
That's why from 2014, 2016, we discussed a lot. And at 2016, we come up with the delay again to catch up with the IFRS 9. So the second postpone, we start up to set up the working group. Because some bank regulator, they still require their prudential regulation. And some prudential regulation is not aligned with the IFRS. So to deal it, we set up the working group. We have from the listed company, from the listed regulator, from the bank association, from the insurance association, from the microfinance association, and come discuss the roadmap. How many years that we can delay? But remember, the effective of the IFRS 9 is 1st January 2019. Whether we postpone later or cut off from 2018. And then we discuss the roadmap and we agree together to set the last postpone is by 31st December 2018 for both bank, microfinance, and the insurance. And a lot of discussion during from 2016 to 2018 because there are a lot of work, gap analysis, challenges, training, work with the stakeholder, auditor. We work together. And 2019 come, we start pilot it, do it by learning again. Some bank ready to go, but some bank is still the challenge. But we try to solve the challenge through the working group. But now we can successfully implement the IFRS 9 for bank and the microfinance and the insurance company. That is our journey. And the challenge is the same. The resource, the expertise is always constrained. We face the same, but we start doing by what we know, what we understand. We start doing small, and at the end of the day, we can reach our goal to implement the IFRS in Cambodia. Thank you.
Wow, I think that's very good sharing. I think even here in Lao PDR also we have the same challenging, but of course, I mean, in order to adopt fully IFRS number 9, that it will take time for those things. Okay, that's good to hearing from you. And then the next we move on to Mr. Fernando as the regional, grouping financial reporting standards set. I know that you're already sharing the challenging part, on adoption IFRS and so on. With your perspective, what is the stakeholder of CLMV can learn from the experience on adoption IFRS?
Yeah, thank you. First of all, I would like to start from what the previous speaker said, learning and doing. Learning from doing. I think that is very important. If you wait until you know everything about, say, for example, IFRS 9, you will never implement IFRS 9. So you have to start at some point implementation of IFRS and then move along, and it's a journey, and you will eventually reach the point of full implementation, full compliance and implementation. So that is what exactly even Sri Lanka did. So we started implementing in 2006, but we were 1 or 2 versions behind the IASB version, and we converged eventually in 2012, and then we were on course. And when it comes to IFRS 9 particularly, I think one speaker mentioned about transformation from rule-based accounting to principle-based. So here actually we also had a very stringent rule-based accounting for banks under central bank guidelines. But important thing that we need to look at is whether any of these rules conflict with the IFRS 9 requirements, even though it is on principle based. Our experience is that majority of the rules are not in conflict. So therefore, at the beginning of implementation of IFRS 9, what we did, we made those rules, or we recommended those rules as a guidance and said, okay, under these principle-based requirements, you apply these rules because they are not in conflict. So there was therefore a transformation period. They slowly converted from rule-based to principle-based. And also at the very beginning, our banks also did not have these databases. So initially, they used to compute, say, for example, probability of default, loss given default, and etc. Based on maybe 3 years data. So we did a very strong stakeholder engagement process so that we got the regulators, we got the auditors, we got the monitoring authority, we got Securities and Exchange Commission, and we all agreed, okay, if the banks have applied IFRS, if the banks have done these computations of PD and LGDs based on 3 years data, then we would not charge them, or we would not qualify their reports for non-compliance under IFRS 9, because under IFRS 9, 3 years is a very short period in estimating these numbers. But then still we started with that, and by now they have 5, 6, 7, 8 years of data. And so the PDs and LGDs and all other parameters have now evolved, and we have more accuracy. But we started and we had issues. But if we didn't start, the banks would have never built up those databases even of late. So therefore, it is very important, learn by doing. So start somewhere and do it. So, and also I think another area that was widely spoken in the panel was that capacity building and technical training. So that is where AOSSG also can assist you. and please get in touch with us so that we can make available the experiences of jurisdictions who have applied IFRS very early, like Hong Kong did for Nepal, and Australia, likewise, even Sri Lanka can support. So we can assign somebody to handhold if you need assistance in capacity building, including particularly this technical training. Thank you.
Thank you, Fernando, for sharing your perspective on this. Okay, I just would like to hear the final message from Professor Siddhartha from IFAC perspective, and also Mr. Piyush as well on experience from India. What is one of the key message, advice from you to advise our CLMV stakeholder, on adoption IFRS? Okay, and then Miss, yeah.
Thank you. The most important message I would go, of course, the panel has spoken well about it. Implementation. Coming to an implementation would be the technology adoption is the most important before we go for an implementations. Whether our systems are ready, whether the stakeholders are ready to that extent. Since our experience has been, if you take any of the IFRS, if you take a fair value measurement, the getting of the proper value of the financial asset is also a difficult situation. So you have to have an appropriate people in place for that, that if tomorrow I'm implementing it, I have an appropriate number of people to actually serve the stakeholders for that purpose. They are also well equipped. They are also knowing how they are doing the valuations to that. That's the one thing. Similarly, technology will be the most crucial impact. If your systems are in place, you have a macros well run, wherein all the calculations, all the issues can be resolved. It can throw out the results immediately. That will help you in implementing it faster and with accuracy. That's important. Third, most importantly, is the two IFRS, which I always feel is most crucial, is IFRS 16 and 17. That's revenue recognition been one, leases been one, the concepts of the controls, how the ownership and risk and rewards have been transferred, how the lease would be identified. All these issues are the very important, and you require a lot of deliberations on them and the training sessions on them. That would be the key. Whether you may call mentoring, whether you call train the trainers, whether you call the certification course, whatever it is. But ultimately, it's important is the training the people who would be all the sides, implementation sides, that is the stakeholders, employees, regulatory side, and also the auditors ultimately. So this would be 2 or 3 important things which I thought I would like to bring down. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And then can we move on to Professor Siddhartha? Just one message, yes.
Okay, thank you. First of all, I think each country has its different issues or context. So I think we need to make sure that we understand, what are the challenges and issues in our countries, and we need to make an action plan, identifying the gap, okay, and then how to close the gap. And I think more importantly then is that when you develop this plan, a roadmap, it's not just a roadmap on how to convert or adopt or implement IFRS, but also you need to consider other factors that also determine whether the implementation will be successful or not. Because as I mentioned in this morning in my speech, is merely converging or adopting IFRS doesn't necessarily imply that the financial report will be of high quality. If the profession is not ready, if the profession is still having problem understanding IFRS, then we cannot expect then the adoption will result in higher quality financial report quality. So when you're making the plan, you also need to consider other factors. So for example, that's why I think the SMUs, but I fact the 7 SMUs, they're highly related. If you want to make sure that your the positive impact of the IFRS, then you also need to refer to IS2, the accounting education standards. You also have to make sure that the auditing standards are also of high quality. Okay, and as the professional accounting organization, you also have to have an internal mechanism to assure the quality of your members when providing service. And also you have to have impose also in the investigation and discipline system in the PE. So all this have to go together in line, and you need to make sure that it's coherent, it's consistent, it's in line. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. We still have few minutes, to end the panel discussion. I would like, I'm not sure whether any question from the floor or from the participant from the online. And maybe, okay, there is one, right? Okay.
Yep. So my name is Vientiane from the Pongsawan Bank, a local bank here. I just got the question regarding when we refer to IFRS implementation. It's also related to Basel implementation for the banks. And the thing is, once we talk the ECL or the credit risk measurement based on IBR approach, the CAR ratio or capital adequacy ratio is going to drop. And one thing alongside with the slide from the professor from India sharing that our P&L is going to drop. So my question is, what can you share experience in your respective country? How's the reaction of your countries cope with this drop in due to the implement of IFRS that impact of double impact in our CAR ratio and P&L swing. So, and how do you exit in terms of those banks that cannot meet the requirement in terms of perspective of preparer and regulator? Thank you.
A very valid question. In fact, that's what the real worry is, which we are speaking on the forum or not, that there would be a drop in capital adequacy ratio. A lot of regulators, when it comes to the banks, they are worried about that. Now, if I come to an India story, India, when we talk of the banks, India has both, it's a mix of, it has a public state-owned banks also, and it has the banks which are privately owned also. So for the state-owned banks, there won't be an issue because the government can always pump in capital. If the government is taking a decision that I want to converge to IFRS, and on implementation of IFRS, there is a reduction and the capital requirement is going up because of the CAR going down. They can obviously pump in the capital, and it's an economic decision which needs to be taken. But one positive point which when financial institutions came with this 2017 was the market was growing at a great GDP. India has been fortunate enough to have a GDP growth of average 7 to 9%, which I believe even the Lao has. It's in this sector, it has a very good economic growth, and 7 to 9% concurrently. And the size of the bank is quite big, like I would say, been today 5th largest economy in India. So the average growth rate, even if I'm implementing IFRS today, and if I have to take a hit of this expected credit loss, the growth in the business is quite high. So it's offsetting it, my capital requirement, because the growth rate itself is high. And the new assets or the new financial assets which have been created in year 1 or year 2 after the convergence, they actually generate you a good profits at the initial year because the low credit risk is very low in the initial years. It's a very less. So your profits are getting offset over to that extent. And therefore, it actually does not make much difference to the NBFCs during 2017, when 17 to 18, when the implementation was done. There was a great rise in the credit offtake. The margins of the interest pressures had improved. So the profits were doing very well. And that profit, whatever loss was coming on account of expected credit loss, got offsetted. And in the initial 12-month credit loss period was not much substantially in the initial period because there were implementation issues, data issues also. And also they got time over a period of 2 years to 3 years. So that's one. Number two, what banks we had, when the banks, because they have not implemented yet, and we had also suggested that any loss on account of initial during the convergence in the year one, we have suggested to central bank also that loss, you may give a little leverage to that extent as far as CAR calculation is concerned for this specific industry. Obviously, there will be an issue when you comply with the Basel norms, but little leeway can be given to that extent, wherein a certain particular assets can be still considered for a CAR if the weightage can be changed to that extent. So that is not an immediate impact in the year one. That's what has been also discussed, but that really didn't went well through the banks, and therefore it could really not be implemented. Number one, and number two, been into banks and been a regulatory body, which we have a different regulator for that. They had an issue also on the data. Basically, if they are not getting a data and if the accurate results are not coming, then really whether we were actually moving to a prudent accounting or not, that was an issue. And therefore it could not happen. But now, after the data analytics, 5 years of implementation for all other industry, all financial institutions, banks have felt that yes, now the data is coming up. With all the challenges, still the data is available to a certain extent. You have also gone through various cycles of GDP growth. You have also gone through certain force major actions during the year at the world level. And they have been quite learned to that extent. So it would be better. I hope I answered you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I think we hearing a lot of experience sharing from IFAC perspective, regional, grouping financial reporting standard setter, as well as from India and also our CLMV. The lesson learned journey. On adoption IFRS. What is the key challenge and so on. Because of the time limit, I think I would like to end of our discussion, panel discussion as now. And please jointly to thank you on panelists for your time taking discussion with us, sharing on your experience and so on. Thank you.